Hello, so today I want to teach you for loops and slicing. So you might be wondering, why am I teaching you these two chapters at the same time that are seemingly unrelated? Well, it's because for loops are actually very related to slicing, and I believe that learning it from that perspective can give you much more control over how you use your for loops compared to someone who learns it alongside while loops and if statements, for instance. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. Firstly, here's the anatomy of a for loop. For I in range, and then a certain number, for example, and then it tells you to print something, like hello. This is the most common kind of for loop you'll ever see, which is for I in a range, print something. But before we get to actually understand what's going on, let's clarify a few things. I doesn't have to be the letter I. You'll usually see it as I, J, or K, but it could be anything. You can just call it variable if you want. It doesn't change anything. It's because you are creating an iterator. An iterator is a variable that changes its value every time a loop goes through, which is in this case, iterating for this. So every time this runs, which is again and again 10 times, the value of variable changes until it hits 10. How do I prove this? Well, over here, there is 10 instances of hello. And if you want even more proof, I can change this to variable. Then you'll see it goes from 0 to 9. 10 digits. So as we can see, the first time the loop runs, it says print variable, which is 0. The next time it runs, it does it for 1, 2, 3, until 9. But you might be wondering, why doesn't it go to 10? Well, that's because for this case, when you're looking at range, it stops before the number that you've talked about, because it starts at 0. Does that make sense? If you start from 0, this is 10 numbers. Not like when we're counting with our fingers, because then we start from 1, and then 10 numbers would bring us to 10. In this case, since we start from 0, we end up at 9. You'll see this a lot in Python, and the term for this is zero indexing. So, now that we have this, let's bring a very interesting idea. So what if I wanted to start from 2 instead? You could do range 2, 10. And the reason why this works is because with range 2, 10, you are effectively saying start from 2 and end before 10, give me every single value of variable. And that's effectively what you're doing. There is a very important idea that you need to know here called start, stop, and skip, which represents the 3 fields that can exist inside of here. Firstly, we have start, then we have stop, which again shows you the limit of how much the loop can go through. But what is skip? Well, let's try a few values to see what skip does. Let's start from 0 to 10, but now our skip is 2. Well, it prints out every single multiple of 2 starting from 0, which is 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, before 10. And if we do that for 3, it'll give you 0, 3, 6, 9, because it gives you every third value. You can do this for any value, in fact, using a skip. So for example, if I do this here, it'll give you 0, 4, 8. Now, this is interesting and all, but what does this actually do? Well, this allows you to loop through only certain parts of things. For example, let's say you have a list and you want to be able to access every third element. You could go and create a flag or create a counter, but the simpler solution is to just change this skip to a 3. And that makes your life way easier. So that is effectively how you can go about using a for loop for regular iteration. Now you might be wondering, whoa, ignore this. I don't know why that spawned in. Okay, ignore this. But now you might be wondering, how exactly would you be able to come up with, let's say, an iterator for a list, like I've mentioned? Well, let's create a list really quick. Let's say this list is a market. In this market, you have apples, and then you have bananas, and then you have pears. So now we have a list called market with all of these things inside. What if we want to print out every single value inside of market? Well, you could just do print market. That's nothing particularly wrong with that. But what if you wanted to create a bunch of text before every single fruit that said, the fruit is? You can't do that with a print statement. So you would have to use a loop. So let's try and use a loop, But this time, we won't use range. We'll use a slightly different function. We will do for fruit in market, and that's it. When we do this, let's just try and print out fruit first to see what happens. You get apples, bananas, and pears. The reason is because your iterator in this case is now a fruit. It goes through every single element, which is apples, then bananas, then pear, throughout the loop's live duration. And at the end, when the loop is closed, then it's done. Every single time the loop is run, it prints out the value it's currently stuck on, which is apples. Next round, it's bananas. Next round, it's pears. So that is effectively how you can go about using a for loop to iterate through a list. But back to the main point. What if we wanted to add some stuff before it? You could do this. This fruit is, and then a space. And this would allow you to put this fruit is, and then the fruit for every single fruit inside of the list. This is the principle of iteration. And this is a very useful concept that you need to understand for the rest of your computing career. Now, let's focus a bit more on strings. Now, I want to talk about strings in a very different capacity. Now, instead of market, let's say I have a string that is a greeting, for example. Hello, I am Jeff. Reviving 2016 memes, are we? So, let's say we wanted to find the first letter in this. Well, it's very simple. We could just do string 0, or I guess in this case, to make it more nice, print string 0. You get H. Great, amazing, awesome, this works. What if I wanted to get the first few letters instead of the first letter? Well, I could do string 1, then string 2, then string 3 by copying everything again and again. But who's got time for that? No one's got time for all that. So what do we do instead? We lazy programmers, we use the same principle as above, which is start, stop, and skip. But in this case, we don't use commas. We use a colon. So if we do this, what do you think will happen? Well, we start at 0, which is H, and we end before the fourth element, which is O in this case, because we start at 0. So if I run this code real quick, we should get hell. As unfortunate as it is, that is effectively how you can do slicing. And that's the most entertaining example I could come up with on such short notice. So now, let me ask you, what if we put a skip over here? What do you think will happen? We get HL, but why? Well, that's because it starts from 0, so it takes H. Then it skips the second one. It goes to L, which prints it. It skips the next L, and then it stops before the O, because that's where the loop cuts. So this is effectively how you can slice strings in Python. It's a very useful and important thing to know, especially when it comes to manipulating long strings. Now, let me give you another interesting example of a long string that you will have to learn to manipulate. Let's say that you have a very, very long piece of garbage text, but a very important number at the end of that. How exactly would you be able to access the number at the end? Well, the problem is you wouldn't unless you know the length of the string, right? You could use like length to find that, but let's say you're not allowed to. In this case, you can use this thing where you use -1 and -2. If I do -1, you get 7. And if I do -2, you get 6. And this principle is because when you do minus, it takes it from the back of the string. You see, if I did 0, it would talk about the first element. And if I did, for example, 4, it would talk about this element over here. But when I use minus, it counts from the back. So, technically speaking, what do you think would happen if I did something like this? Well, this wouldn't make sense because your starting would be away or behind the finishing. But what if I did this instead? You would get 6, and what if I did this? You get 6, 7. And the reason why is because you are saying start from -2, which is over here, and make it all the way which is over here, and make it all the way to the end of the array. That is effectively what you've done over here. That is why you're able to come up with the last two digits using this. It's because it says start from -2, which is 6 in this case, and then make it all the way to the end. So this is an example of how you can use slicing to your advantage. You will see slicing in a lot of different things and a lot of different applications. So just keep in mind that when you use slicing and when you use for loops, start, stop, and skip is the most important framework that can save you a lot of time and energy. So yeah, with that, I'm out. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye-bye.